Alright guys, how you doing? Right, I just bought myself a new graphics card because my old one died on me. I just bought an R9 285 because it was a very good price. It was a Sapphire version, the Dual X. I read up on it and yeah, it looked like it had a really nice cooler on it, which is important to me. And since then I've been having a bit of fun with it, and it brought me in mind of the video I did on AMD's Crimson drivers when I was talking about the frame rate target control. And I just thought, you know, you've actually got an awful lot of control over your graphics card now, and yet so few people are actually really mastering it. So this is what I'm going to do in this video. Now what do I mean by that? Well, you're going to need a program, something like Sapphire Tracks. This is only going to work with AMD graphics cards. However, you've got the EVGA Precision software, or you've got MSI Afterburner. I actually use Afterburner. Here it is here. It lets you change the power limit. You can change your core clock speeds, you can change your memory clock, your fan speeds. You can set up things like a fan profile, custom fan profile, so that your fan will increase in speed at certain temperatures, stuff like that. This is the stuff that I'm going to go over here. So I'm going to cover a bit of overclocking. I'm going to cover underclocking, undervolting, that sort of stuff as well, because not everybody wants to overclock. But even if you're not overclocking, you can still undervolt and save power, save temperatures. Really, what it's all about for me, most of all, is the noise. I simply can no longer tolerate the noise that certain graphics cards make. Over the last couple of years it's got a lot better. Both Nvidia and AMD have been doing much better with their coolers, and many cards now are effectively silent, even at load. If not silent, they're pretty quiet. But if you work on it, yeah, you can get it so that it's absolutely perfect, and this is what I'm going to do here. Right, first of all, like I said, I'm going to start with Sapphire Tracks. All this software is the same. Doesn't matter what you use, yeah? You've either got dials, or you've got knobs or bars or something to, you know, change. You can change the voltage, you can change the GPU clock speed, you can change the memory clock speed. Well, generally speaking, once you've got everything where you want it, you'd click on apply and hope that it doesn't crash on you. That's pretty much how it works. There is an actual science behind it, however, so that's the way I'm going to do it. Let's just hit reset. Right, now you can see that the stock clock speed, it's just a stock 285 that I've got, and it's 918 MHz, so it's pretty slow in actual fact. The GPU voltage is 0 millivolts, and the memory clock speed's not that fast either. I'm probably not even going to bother overclocking the memory because you get so little out of it and it just feels kind of pointless, and you could end up, you know, breaking your graphics card because you've overclocked your memory too much. I mean, to hell with that. And that brings me in mind of my warning. First of all, before you do any of this, be aware that you can, of course, end up really killing your graphics card. For example, this thing here, this GPU voltage. If you just go like that, then click apply, probably gonna kill your graphics card. So do yourself a favour and don't do anything stupid. These red bars here, yeah, it's like the same as in nature. Red is like a warning sign. Just don't go there. Don't go here either, or here. In fact, we will be avoiding the orange in this video. Right, so I said that noise is the most important thing to me, so that's the first thing that I'm going to deal with. We've got a fan control here, automatic. Right now it's sitting at 24% current fan speed. Now, if I click on fixed, it goes up to 53% for some reason, I don't know why that is, and I can hear my fan going. It's not too loud, it's actually not bad. If I put it up to 100, yeah, way too loud. You're not going to be able to hear it, but that would just drive me to distraction. Even at 60%, I mean, it's clearly audible. That would not like really do my head in, but I would rather not hear it at all. So I'm going to be looking at, I can hardly hear it at 42%. 45% it is practically inaudible over the rest of the noise in this room. But I can just about sort of hear it at 50%, so I don't want to be going there. So let's make 45% my maximum. Right, so this is the max. I do not want my fan going higher than that under any circumstances. And the way this is all linked is pretty simple, yeah? The higher the fan speed, the lower the temperature is going to be. However, as you increase the clock speeds, this is going to increase the temperature at any given current fan speed, yeah? So it's really a balancing act. What I'm going to do now though is click on this custom. What we have here is the ability to set a custom fan profile. I'm just going to get rid of all these. So we'll just set it to 20%. You can see along the bottom is the temperatures. Now obviously lower temperatures are better, however, as you're gaming the temperatures are going to go up, there's no getting away from that. It depends on other things like how many fans you've got in your case, how good your airflow is, how high the ambient temperature is as well. I'm one of those guys who does not like to see higher than mid 70 temperatures. Yeah, so 75 would pretty much be my limit. So based on my 45% fan speed, I do not want my GPU going above 75. So this is going to determine what my maximum clock speed will be. Right, so the simplest way to do a fan profile for me would be this. You start off with a box at 0 and 0. Now, I said 75 degrees and 45% fan speed, so let's try and find where this is on the chart. You can move up and down until you get it perfect. Right, there we go. 45%, 75 degrees. Now what will happen now is the fan will simply slowly ramp all the way up to 75 degrees, and this flat line here means that it will top out at 45%. If the card ever got above 75 degrees, it would just continue. The fan will never go above 45 at that. So you actually have to make up your mind. Would you rather have higher temperatures or a louder fan? In my case, I would sort of say, right, I definitely don't want it going above 80. So make 80 the final cutoff mark. Just click on the grid again. You've now got 80. At which point you can say, right, at 80 the fan goes all the way up to 100%. It shouldn't get that far, but this is a sort of fail-safe just to ensure that the card never goes above 80 degrees. Now this is a pretty basic custom fan control. It's really just to show you how it works. Your own card will be different from mine, and you may find it's better to do stuff like, for example, here you've got 30% and it will remain at 30% all the way to 40 degrees. At which point you may decide, right, I want the fan going to 45% instantly between 35 and 45 as soon as it hits 40 degrees. And then you would have it remain at 45% all the way to 75 degrees, at which point you may decide to slowly ramp it all the way up to 100%. Again, it should never really reach this state, but that's just another example. Incidentally, now that I've done that, you need to click on settings here. It brings up this tab, and you would want to save the fan settings with a profile. Yeah, you can save the profile after you've done it by clicking 1 and save. So this is now saved. Right, so let's actually go with this one. The fan should not go above 45% until it hits 75 degrees. And the way we're going to test it is by using the Heaven Benchmark 4.0. I'll leave a link to all this in the description, yeah? Now this is how I've set up Heaven to do these benchmarks and testing. DirectX 11, quality high, normal tessellation, and 4x anti-aliasing. The point in this is that Heaven will really stress the GPU at whatever clock speed you've got. It will push the temperature up to the maximum because the GPU will be working at its maximum. And I'm going to run this 3 times in a row to see what kind of temperatures the graphics card reaches. So back in a bit. Right, so here we have the results. First up, stock speed of 918 MHz, we get an FPS total of 48.8. That's the only one that we're really interested in seeing here with the Heaven benchmark. Now if we take a look at tricks, what's interesting here is a hardware monitor, which you can bring up by clicking on the hardware monitor. What you're interested in seeing is how straight this line is at the top. You don't want it dipping down because that means that the core clock hasn't been able to maintain its maximum speed. As you can see, it's done a pretty good job here. These dips can be absolutely anything, I wouldn't worry too much about that. You're more concerned when it is consistently lower than the maximum clock. Also keeping an eye out in the temperatures, the maximum it reached was only 67 degrees, so this is going to be good. I'm going to get a decent overclock at least before I run out of temperature. So after that I decided I'm going to overclock up to 1 GHz, 1000 MHz, and as you can see here I got an FPS total of 50.3. So that's a decent increase over the 48.8 FPS of the stock. Again, if we look at tricks, you can see it's not too bad. There's 1 or 2 little dips, but this can be like during a change of the scene or something. Don't worry about that at all. And the GPU temperature maxed out at only 1 degree higher at 68 degrees, so this really does bode well. It seems to be a very good cooler on the graphics card that's able to keep my temperatures low, and this is me running 2 screens, which is probably adding another 8 to 10 degrees. So I decided to go for 1050 MHz, and this was the result. I now know that the graphics card will not do 1050 MHz without getting more voltage. Normally you should only really be increasing in 20 to 30 MHz, that's what they tell you to do, yeah, but I've done this quite a lot. I also checked online and I sort of knew that 1050 was safe, although it was unlikely to actually pass the benchmark. So I've basically gone up to 1000, up to 1050, and it has failed at 1050 MHz. I'm going to have to dial it back a bit then. So if it passes at 1000 and fails at 1050, you may as well go for 1025. It passed 1025 with flying colours and 51 frames per second. And here you can see the maximum temperature reached was 69 degrees, so again only 1 degree. The overclock barely bothers the cooler at all. After that, it was simply a case of finding what the limit was. I finally ended up with an FPS of 51.4, and that had topped out at 1040 MHz. That is how fast the card can go without requiring extra voltage. Now, what I should say though is, a lot of this depends on the actual ambient temperature, stuff like that, yeah? Just because I've found the maximum limit does not mean I should be running the card at that 24/7. In fact, there's no way you should do that. The smart thing to do now is dial it back maybe 20 MHz, or increase the voltage if you want to maintain this GPU clock speed. Again, up here you can see it's not too bad at all. It was able to maintain the 1040 clock speed without too much trouble. I actually maxed at 70 degrees, which again, well within my 75 degree limit. Now when I looked at the 1050 benchmark, I could tell that there was one or two little artifacts. I knew that it wasn't going to be stable, however it was very, very close. That's why I knew that 1040 would probably be okay. In this case here, I went up to 1055, I added 20 millivolts only, which is very little, and it did manage to pass it. 51.7 FPS and a score of 1303. I finally broke 1300. Feeling slightly emboldened by that, I actually increased the voltage to 50 millivolts. You can't see it here, but I went up to 50 millivolts and 1100 MHz on the GPU clock. You can see here the maximum of 1104 was reached. GPU temperatures hit 72, which again is well within my 75 limit. However, you can see here that the GPU core was not able to maintain the maximum of 1104. It was just always running a little bit below it, maybe around 1077, something like that, and very rarely reached the actual maximums. This is when you would increase the power limit and hope that that made it able to maintain the 1104. For me though, I've decided that was enough. I had already gone into the orange with the GPU voltage after saying that I wasn't going to do that, so that's enough for me as far as the overclocking and overvolting goes. All that's left to do now is decide what it is you want to settle on. I could quite easily go for 1025 MHz. It will run absolutely fine 24/7, well below my temperatures, no problems whatsoever. However, I decided in this case to go back down to 1000 MHz, which got me in this case a score of 50.4 FPS. So what I had decided to do was go down to 1000 MHz again, drop the GPU voltage by 30 millivolts. It had no problem running heaven at all, and the maximum temperature was only 66 degrees Celsius. So if you remember the very first test, at 918 MHz clock speed, no change to the voltage, and the temperature maxed out at 67 degrees. After that, I went up to 1000 MHz and it topped out at 68 degrees here, yeah? So what I had finally decided to settle on at 1000 MHz with a minus 30 millivolt voltage and 66 degree temperatures, it has basically just been a win everywhere. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, not only is this a free lunch, it was cake for lunch, and not only do you get to eat the cake, you also get to have it, because I've got faster GPU clock speeds, less voltage, lower temperatures, and absolutely no noise whatsoever from my graphics card. The very final thing I tried was stock speed with a massive minus 75 millivolt GPU voltage. It passed easily, and the maximum temperature was 61 degrees while running at this value. Now if you think about it, if you're really struggling with temperatures and you can get away with a decent size undervolt, then you can really be saving almost 7-8 degrees simply by undervolting your GPU. It's something that's well worth considering, especially in smaller form factors, mini ITX cases, that sort of thing, yeah? Your mileage is going to vary, yeah? Depending on your graphics card and the rest of your system, you may or may not get a better or worse overclock. All that's left to do is basically save your settings. No matter what program you're using, there's a way to save a setting. Maybe save it as a profile, make sure that you've got it stable, and then you can apply it at the system startup. Now I had a bit of trouble saving it with tricks, so I've actually just gone back to Afterburner. I'm not quite sure how EVGA precision works, if that works okay. One of you Nvidia guys can let me know. I'm probably going to use Afterburner. I've got my fan profile set up. There it is there on Afterburner. It's probably a bit cleaner, a bit easier to see on Afterburner what I'm doing there with my fan profile. Again, that's the important part for the noise. Again, just be very careful if you're going to be changing your core voltages, yeah? And also, like I said, I'm not a big fan of memory overclocks. The last thing you want to do, if you're using AMD, go into AMD Overdrive. You can also do this in Afterburner. You can do it in EVGA Precision, but you can't do it in Tricks. You're going to go into Catalyst Control Center, or your Crimson Control Center now, and you're going to click on Frame Rate. If you've got a 60Hz monitor, does it need to be going higher than 60 frames per second? Instead of allowing your graphics card to go all the way up to 95 or higher, I'll just show you what the difference that this can make is. So here I am in Fallout 4, up at the top left corner, 83 frames per second. If we take a look at Afterburner, you can see I've got my settings set to my sweet spot, the fan speed is at 40, and you can just see that the GPU temperature is just creeping up to 67 degrees. And you can see here that the usage is almost always maxed out, which is what you would expect because the GPU is trying to maintain the highest frame rate it possibly can. What happens when you limit it to 60 frames per second? You get the exact same experience, yeah? 60 frames per second, 83 frames per second. It's the same on a 60Hz monitor. But you can clearly see the difference in Afterburner. Now it has topped out at 61 Celsius. You can see what the GPU is doing, yeah? Instead of being constantly maxed out, it's quite happy to drop down to 0. And that allows the temperature to recover so that it doesn't need to push higher. And you can see down at the bottom here, this is at a 30% fan speed. So the temperatures are 6 degrees lower at a lower fan speed, and yet you're getting the same performance out of it. There's one other good thing about the frame rate limiter. 450 frames per second at the top left. You don't want your graphics card doing that on something like a menu, yeah? So the frame rate limiter here would help to keep this at 60. Stop your graphics card fan going nuts. But that's pretty much it for this video. As always, fire away questions in the comments below. Let me know what software you're using, especially the Nvidia guys. It's been a while since I've used any Nvidia software like that, but I had heard that the EVGA Precision one is the best one to use, but let me know if that's not the case. And have fun tweaking your graphics cards. We'll catch you later, guys.